If you've been paying attention, then you know that every company is putting out their own box set of paints, whether it's for John Blanche or content creators or for Infinity. Everybody wants their piece of the pie. So the question is, should you buy their piece? Is their piece apple or blueberry? Let's talk about it. Now, I haven't received boxes from every company, but Infinity did send me one of theirs, and I have some thoughts about it. So, without wasting any more time, let's get into it and see what you think. Alright, so this is the box that I got from Infinity. It includes one exclusive model, which I thought was kind of cool, and 10 bottles, 8 acrylic paints, 1 effect paint, which is that bright pink one, and then a dark blue speed paint. I had never used effect paints or speed paints other than ones that I had made myself, and so I was actually really excited to do this. So first things first, put the model together, primed it black, then I pulled out the handy dandy instructions, and the first thing they said to do was to get out that Pano blue and base coat the entire model. So that's what I did. I got out a big brush, started going around the whole thing. I thinned down the paint just a hair. I didn't have to thin it down too much. And I was actually really impressed with how well it covered right over the black, especially being a lighter color. I have not done a ton of painting with professional paints. I usually just use cheap stuff. I have some coming, which will be awesome when they get here. But this was my first real attempt with good paints and following a tutorial that they had set up for their paints. So I was kind of excited for that. But yeah, it took me 2 coats of that paint, and then I moved on to step 2, where they say to use that Hyperpower blue. We're going to use a 50-50 mix of the white and the black, and then we're going to paint the pants and the bags with that Spec Ops brown. So moving in, I started painting with the speed paint. And every time I've seen people use a speed paint, I've seen them do the slap chop, and they just put that over everything. And so when the instructions said to neatly apply the speed paint, I was a little caught off guard. And it actually ended up being really, really fun. It's definitely harder to use than I thought it was going to be, just because it is so fluid. And it's supposed to be, but to paint neatly with that was a little harder than I thought it was going to be, especially because it is such a dark color. But I went over that armor, super happy with how it turned out. And then I moved on to painting the armor plates with that 50-50 blend of the black and the white. It came out as a really dark gray, and I was kind of shocked just by how dark it was, especially when you look at the finished pictures of how bright it was. But I decided I was going to just follow and do what it told me to do and see what happened. And so I just kept going through and getting all those plates. I painted the pants and forgot to record it because I am terrible. But I moved on to using a full black to paint all of the weapons and the accessories and the gloves as well, which I didn't mention, but in the picture they were painted, so I just followed the picture because that's cool, and I wanted it to look as close to the same as I could get it. Then, moving on to step 3, we have highlights and more highlights using these 3 colors, which we've already used so far. So I thought this will be pretty easy, right? And I proceeded to do blue highlights over everything that I had painted with that speed paint. And I was just kind of in shock of is this really how they tell you to paint things? Is this really the way that I should have been painting things? And anyway, I went with it because, you always got to do highlights. You always got to go over that base coat. And when I was doing it, I was actually really impressed with how it turned out. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of did a dry brushing method almost, where I just went back and forth with a very little amount of paint on my brush, trying not to get into the crevices and just to go over the top. And I think that worked really well. You totally could have dry brushed it as well, but I thought we'll just dry brush it with the actual brush that we're using. And like I said, I think it turned out really, really well. Then moving back onto the shield plates, I did the same thing with highlights now 85% white, 15% black. And I'm slowly starting to realize, oh, this is where the armor plates are going to get that light color that I saw before. So just trusting the process. Then it had me paint the bicep plates, which is what they called them, and I did my best. But in the end, I feel like I kind of painted things that I shouldn't have, and yeah, you'll see. You'll see. In the end, I kind of went back and just did my best to make sure everything looked the way I thought it was supposed to. But I used that blue, and then I went over the pants again with a mix of black and Australia. Okay, so before we get into the finer parts of this, I gotta ask, is this how you paint? Like, is this what you do? Because I feel like most of my paint jobs have like 3 layers. You got your base, your color, your highlight, your wash, right? This thing's got like 100. So like, really, is this how you paint? Is this the way that you're supposed to paint? I'm genuinely curious because this seems crazy to me. I feel like there are parts of this model that I painted that you won't even see that color ever because it's been covered up by so many things. And I mean, maybe it's faster, but I don't know. It just seems kind of crazy to me. And it turned out pretty good. And then I moved on to step 5. We're flying through these steps. There's 9 steps overall, by the way. And step 5 was honestly third highlights is what it was called. And like I said, not used to operating this way, but I thought, let's just do it. Let's just go. And so I did that. It's a 50-50 blend of the Pano blue and the matte white over the top. And basically you're supposed to do all the highlights that you can think to do, all the tops of everything. Any lines that you want for light, you can do those as well. I think it was around this point that I realized the bottoms of his shoes should be black. And so I ended up fixing that in the next steps. I don't think I actually recorded that, but just little things along the way that I wanted to fix. And then it had me go over the pants again after doing this highlight, after finishing all of these highlights. And the pants I thought was really interesting because they had me do the outside a darker brown and they had me do the insides a lighter brown. And I honestly thought this is going to look so weird because they're just so different. It's just going to look like he's wearing pants that are 2 different colors. But again, in the end, their wisdom outweighed on my own. And I really like how it ended up looking in the end. So jumping on to 4th highlights, where we're doing just pure white on the spots that need it. We're going to highlight the biceps with these 2 colors, making them a little, I don't know, almost worn looking. And then the metal parts, we're going to highlight with a mixture of 50-50 matte white and matte black. And so I kept, the same palette. I was going back to certain colors over and over again, so it was kind of nice to have that. But I started with those white highlights on the armor, and then like I said, in those spots that needed to reflect the sunlight. I'm used to doing like a zenithal highlight, and when you do that, you don't typically have to do this too much, or you do, but you can see where it's specifically supposed to go. This time I didn't have that. This time I was just going off of the matte colors and then lighting things up each little step as I went. And it actually gave me a big respect for the zenithal highlight. I've talked about it before and just been like, I don't even know why this is necessary. Watching this showed me why it was necessary. And then I hit the guns with that blend, trying to get those lines, and came back and just did those highlights on the bicep to make it look a little more worn. And then I moved on to what they called the finishing touches, where we're using all 3 of these colors for different things. And it was super fun and super interesting to kind of see it coming to an end. And this was the first time, that I've done a face for Infinities. Their miniatures, I've always done like the masks and stuff like that. And so I was super excited to see how this face would come along. And one of the things that I thought was really cool, and I don't show it here because, well, I'll explain that in a minute. But it had me do the paint for the face, come back, hit the beard with that black, hit the beard and the hair with that black. And it was too watered down to begin with, and so I had to thicken it back up a little bit. But then it has you come back and hit the face with a wash. Not a wash that they gave you, but a wash of Spec Ops brown to the face. And so basically, I had to create my own wash. So I don't have footage of the last tiny little things that I did, but it was basically just highlighting to my level of expertise, which is not very high. And, you know, finishing up the face, doing the eyes and things like that. I've been sick. I went to ballet and painted in the car while my daughter was at ballet because that's just the kind of guy I am. And it ended up looking like this. So back to the question at the very beginning of this, is it worth buying? The answer to that is a big yes and a big no, because if this is what you're looking for, if you're looking to paint this specific army, this has all the paints that you need to paint that color for 50, 60 units, you know? So it's a great way to get there, and you got a tutorial on how to do it, which makes it awesome. If you want to paint like a content creator, you can pick up Ninjon's pack, you know, and you'll paint more like him using his colors. So sure, that makes sense. But if you're painting Blood Angels and you have this set of blue, it's not really going to help you. Okay, you're better off with the paints that you have and just using those paints. One thing I will say about this box though, is that the tutorial, I had never done anything like that before. Seeing how they put their paint scheme together was awesome. It was incredible, and I liked that part of it. So for me, it was definitely worth buying just to get kind of a hands-on, do this, then do this, then do this. And just being able to see the differences as I went, it's cool. Will I paint like that in the future for standard generic stuff? No, probably not, because that's a lot. But for things that I want to paint really well, yeah, I just might. And maybe you will too. So, in my mind, this Infinity bundle was awesome. It was well worth picking up. I have tons of Panocean units, so I'll be using this a lot, and so I'm very happy with it. So if you like that, please like, subscribe, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about these boxes. Are they just another gimmick, or do you think they're actually worth it? I'm genuinely curious, because I started this thinking one way, and I ended it thinking maybe not so much. I mean, after all, here at Pulse Games, we're all about making your tabletop experience the best it can be. And as always, don't spend so much time building your world, painting it, that you forget to spend some time in it. Until next time.